And then, she concludes with her favorite line. Ano raw siya? I'm not a girl, pero hindi pa siya woman. Nasaan siya? Nasa gitna. Magandang araw sa inyong lahat. We are here to talk about the fourth chapter of the human life. Reviewin lang natin, no? Ano yung unang chapter? Yung tinatawag nating prenatal period. Second chapter, paglabas mo from your mother, ang tawag na sa'yo is infant. You enter infancy. After infancy, after 2 years, magiging child ka na. Diba? Childhood na. And under childhood, pinag-usapan natin in the previous videos na merong tatlong sub-classes or sub-periods. We have early childhood, middle childhood, and late childhood. For today, pag-uusapan na natin yung chapter 4, Adolescence. Para mas maintindihan natin kung ano ba ang spirito ng tao during adolescence, napakaganda na i-analyze natin yung kanta na sinulat at kinanta ni Britney Spears. It is entitled I'm Not a Girl, Not Yet a Woman. Kasi itong kantang to talagang nagpapakita ng mga key attributes ng isang tao na nasa adolescence. Sabi niya dun sa kanta, I used to think I had the answers to everything. But now I know that life doesn't always go my way. I feel like I'm caught in the middle. That's when I realize. Ano daw yung na-realize niya? I'm not a girl, not yet a woman. All I need is time, a moment that is mine, while I'm in between. Yung salitang between, very important yan sa pag-iintindi kung anong ibig sabihin ng adolescence. In fact, if you analyze the etymology, yung origin ng word ng adolescence, it means in between, in transition to, from childhood papuntang adulthood. Kaya tama yung sinabi niya dito no? I'm not a girl, not yet a woman. Hindi na siya bata, pero hindi pa rin siya adult. Ano siya? Adolescent siya. Sabi pa niya, there is no need to protect me. It's time that I learn to face up to this on my own. I've seen so much more than you know now, so don't tell me to shut my eyes. And then dito yata to sa bridge, no? Ang sabi niya, if you look at me closely, you will see it in my eyes that this girl will always find her way. And then, she closes the song again with the chorus. Sabi niya, I'm not a girl, not yet a woman. All I need is time, a moment that is mine, while I'm in between. And then, she concludes with her favorite line. Ano raw siya? I'm not a girl, pero hindi pa siya woman. Nasaan siya? Nasa gitna. So that's what it means to be an adolescent, no? So based doon sa kanta, marami tayong mga matututunan na mga bagay on how the spirit of an adolescent work during this period of life. Usually, yung adolescence na yan, it ranges from age 13 to 19 years old. Kaya nga tinatawag din nila ito na teenage years. So kapag adolescent ka, most likely ang age mo is from 13 to 19. So let's talk about what generally happens kapag ang tao ay nandito sa period na ito. But first things first, pag-usapan muna natin ano ang pagkakaiba ng puberty from adolescence because many people are interchanging, pinagpapalit nila yung dalawang salita na yan na hindi naman tama, no? When you say puberty, this is the indicator that you are already in adolescence. So adolescence is the period or the stage. Kahalintulad ng adolescence ang prenatal period, infancy, childhood, and then adolescence, 'di ba? Isa siyang life period. Yung puberty naman, ito yung nagpapatunay, ito yung nagsasabi sa iyo that a person has already entered adolescence. Kung baga, think of puberty as a gate. Para siyang gate na kapag nakapasok ka na doon sa gate na yon, officially adolescent ka na. Kaya alam nyo, technically speaking, sa developmental psychology, ang pagiging teenager, ang pagiging adolescent, wala yan sa edad. Nandoon yan sa puberty. Kung nagkaroon ka na ng puberty, nakaranas ka na ng puberty, then adolescent ka na. Kung hindi pa, hindi ka ba adolescent? So, ibig sabihin, pwedeng 14 years old ka na, pero nasa late childhood ka pa rin. Bakit? Kasi hindi ka pa naka-experience ng puberty. Ganun din naman sa mga bata. Kung halimbawa, 9 years old pa lang siya, pero nagkaroon na siya ng puberty. Then, kahit 9 years old ka pa lang, we can say that you have already entered adolescence. So, yun yung pagkakaiba. Puberty is the indicator that you are already in adolescence. Pero ano ba yung puberty na sinasabi natin? Puberty is very physical. Ito yung mga pagbabago sa katawan ng tao na kung saan yung kanyang katawan ay nagiging or nakikita natin na papunta na sa pagiging adult. So kapag yung katawan ng tao papunta na sa pagiging adult, nakakakita na tayo ng mga changes. Then yun yung tinatawag nating puberty. At alam na natin yan, no? Yung mga babae tumatangkad, nag-develop sila ng breast, yung mga lalaki nagkakaroon na ng pubic hairs, no? I mean kahit naman sa mga girls na may pubic hairs, yung mga lalaki mas nagiging muscular, unti-unti yung voice nila lumalalim. These are all called puberty. Ito yung mga physical changes na nangyayari. Again, kapag na-experience mo na yung puberty, this tells us that you have already entered adolescence. Trivia, alam nyo ba na ang puberty mas maagang nararanasan ng mga babae compared sa mga lalaki? And you can see this, for example, in flag racings, di ba? Tignan mo yung pila ng elementary versus yung pila ng mga high schoolers. Sa elementary school, usually, mas matatangkad ang mga babae. Kasi mas maaga silang nakakapasok sa puberty, therefore mas mabilis silang tumangkad. In fact, that's one of the first changes that you will see in the body. Tatangkad. So, mas maagang nagpo-puberty yung mga babae, so tatangkad sila ng mas maaga during elementary. Pero punta ka naman sa pila ng mga high school, you will see na generally mas matangkad na yung mga lalaki kumpara sa mga babae. Kasi, kumahabol na. No, dahil nakapasok na yung mga babae elementary, yung mga lalaki naman yung magsisitangkaran during high school. So that's what you mean by puberty. And what starts puberty? In fact, the experience of puberty, nakadepende yan sa brain. Merong specific part of the brain na ang tawag ay pituitary gland. That's a small part of the brain but with big responsibility. Yung pituitary gland, yung nagpapa-signal sa katawan ng tao na mag-release na ng sex hormones. And when we talk about sex hormones, ito na yung testosterone sa mga lalaki at estrogen sa mga babae. So, when these sex hormones are released in the bloodstreams of boys, bloodstreams of girls, doon na nanggagaling yung mga pagbabago sa katawan ng tao. So, yung mga physical changes that we see from a teenager, these are actually the effects of hormones na nandoon sa kanilang mga dugo. Kaya nga 'di ba during adolescence, sabi ng mga ibang author, ito rin yung tinatawag na raging hormones. Maraming hormones, maraming sex hormones sa dugo ng isang teenager at yun yung nagpapabago sa kanya ng anyo ng katawan. But do you know na yung hormones hindi lang puro physical ang epekto? Meron ding epekto yung hormones in the psychological functioning of the person. Like for example, especially for boys, nagkakaroon na ngayon sila ng interest in sex. Kasi tumataas na yung libido nila, tumataas na yung sex drive nila. So, when they talk, when they think, most of the time, it becomes very sexual. Sa mga girls naman, nagiging moody sila, especially when they experience PMS. Premenstrual syndrome. Shortly before they have their monthly period, napaka-unstable kasi ng hormones nila during this time. So, ang nangyayari, dahil unstable yung hormones nila, it affects their moods. Kaya maraming mga girls, bago sila magkaroon, masusungit. Diba? It affects their emotions. For both boys and girls, nagkakaroon din sila ng self-consciousness. Mas nagiging conscious na sila sa kanilang mga sarili. In fact, meron silang ilusyon na lahat ng tao nakatingin sa kanila. In developmental psychology, ang tawag dyan, imaginary audience. Meron silang nafe-feel nila na lahat ng tao tinitignan yung bawat galaw nila. Although hindi naman totoo yun, but for a teenager, it feels so real. Imaginary audience ang tawag doon. No? Now, this is a picture showing us na ang isang batang lalaki, kapag dadami na talaga yan ang testosterone sa kanyang dugo, nagiging interest na niya yung mga sexual issues. Things become very sexual for a boy. Diba? Dati-dati naman ang issue ng sex, wala sa kanya yan eh. Diba? During early childhood years, middle childhood years, ang gusto ng mga lalaki, mga toys, makipaglaro, manalo sa mga games, mag-computer. But during this time, dahil nga sa testosterone, nagiging ganyan na sila, nakaka-feel na sila ng mga sex drives. And of course, this is for both boys and girls. Isa pang epekto ng hormones sa kanila, nagkakaroon na sila ng interest in the opposite sex. Remember, sa mga previous videos natin, nung early childhood pa lang, middle childhood pa lang, yung kanilang interaction with the other sex very minimal. In fact, they stay within their own sex. Pero during this time, dahil marami ng hormones, nagiging sexual na ang mga lalaki at babae, nagkakaroon na sa ngayon sila ng interest towards the opposite sex. Ito yung tinatawag nating cross-sex interaction. Dumadami yan during this time. In fact, if you notice yung barkadahan ng mga tao during adolescence, it's a mixture of boys and girls. Yung barkada during this time, merong babae, merong lalaki. Hindi na sila exclusive sa mga babae lang or exclusive sa mga lalaki lang. Again, the reason is, mataas yung sex drive nila so they feel sexually good whenever they are with the opposite sex. Okay, epekto yan ng hormones. Now, every time I teach this to my students in the classroom, lagi nilang tinatanong, masama ba ang magkaroon ng sex drive? Is it bad for you to feel sexual feelings during this time? The answer is no. Merong ibang mga teachers kasi, merong ibang mga adults nagsasabi, to feel sexual things is evil. It is against the Bible. I beg to disagree. Because, going back to the book of Genesis, merong sinabi ang creator of the spirit. Anong sabi niya? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. In other words, have a lot of sex to fill the earth. Now, the thing is, I believe, nung ginawa ng Diyos ang tao at sinabi niyang multiply and fill the earth, binigyan ng Diyos ang tao ng pangangailangan niya para magawa niya yung multiply and fill the earth. And one of those needs is sex drive. Diba? Para ganahan ka na mag-multiply, magkaroon ka ng motivation to multiply, kinakailangan mo ng sex drive. And that is exactly what God has given man to fulfill this command. Multiply and fill the earth, you need sex drive. So God gave man sex drive, kaya hindi masama yan. Whether your sex drive will be right or wrong really depends on how you handle your sex drive. Diyan nagkakatalo. So, meron kang nararamdaman, meron kang sexual feelings, hindi masama yan. Pero anong gagawin mo sa sexual feelings na yan? Diyan na ngayon papasok kung magiging masama ba o mabuti yung sex drive mo. Papaano mo i-express yung sex drive mo? That is where the morality of sex drive begin to enter. Kapag yung sex drive mo, hindi maayos yung pag-handle mo. Diba? Namboboso ka, nambabastos ka, o nakikipag-sex ka, no, nang hindi ka pakasal, o you are risking yourself, you are risking other people, doon na ngayon nagiging masama yung dulot ng sex drive. But sex drive in itself is not bad. So, paano ba yung tamang pag-handle ng sex drive? The best way to handle sex drive during adolescence is i-channel dapat. I-channel mo dapat o ililipat mo or ilalabas mo sa ibang paraan yung mga sex drives mo in a constructive way. Diba? Like for example, gawa ka ng mga bagay na magpapayaman sa sarili mo, na magpapayaman sa ibang tao, or magpapayaman sa community. In fact, yan yung advantage ng isang teenager, mataas ang energy, including sexual energy. Pero ang maganda sa sexual energy, pwede mo siyang i-convert sa ibang forms of energy that can be constructive. Yun na nga, tulad ng pagpapayaman sa sarili, sa ibang tao, at sa komunidad. So, imbis na gumawa ka ng mga bagay na illegal because of your high sex drive, gawin mo na lang, i-convert mo yan sa mga constructive things. Nakatulong ka na sa sarili mo, pati sa ibang tao. Okay? Ngayon, pag-usapan natin yung adolescent brain. This is one of the most important issues if you really want to understand why teenagers are the way they do. yung pagtakbo ng kanilang utak because biopsychology, neuropsychology has taught us na unique yung takbo ng utak ng isang teenager. So ano ba itong iba't ibang mga uniqueness sa takbo ng utak ng isang teenager? Number one, you have to remember that during adolescence, mataas ang dopamine. Yung brain nagre-release ng maraming dopamine at na-expose siya sa high levels of dopamine. And may epekto yan sa behavior ng isang teenager. When you have high levels of dopamine, ang epekto niyan is teenagers by nature would like to experience risky behaviors. Kaya marami mga teenagers mahilig sa thrill, mahilig sa excitement. Diba? And there are many ways how they get this excitement. Drunk driving, gambling, sexual adventures. Kaya sila laging gumagawa ng mga bagay na yan. For them, by doing these things, they are satisfying the call of their brain to find thrilling activities. Again, saan ba nanggaling yung kanilang kagustuhan for these thrilling activities? Because of dopamine. Hindi mo naman talaga maiiwasan yan. By nature, ang brain exposed sa high levels of dopamine during teenage years. Number two, another thing to remember about the adolescent brain is hyperactive yung amygdala ng mga teenagers, habang yung kanilang prefrontal cortex is still very underdeveloped. Ngayon, ano bang ibig sabihin ng amygdala, or in some textbooks, amygdala? So, bahala kayo kung paano ipopronounce yan. But amygdala is a small part of the brain that is considered to be one of the emotional centers. Ibig sabihin, amygdala is what makes people emotional. So when a person is highly emotional, excited siya, natatakot siya, galit na galit siya, yung amygdala sa MRI nagiging very active. And guess what? Silipin mo sa MRI ang utak ng isang teenager, most of the time, yung amygdala niyan laging active, which tells you that in general, the teenage brain is very emotional. Okay? In fact, merong implication yan eh. If the brain of the teenager is frequently very emotional, meron silang tendency to experience the amygdala hijack. Ibig sabihin ng amygdala hijack, nangunguna o pinapakinggan ng mga teenagers yung sinasabi ng amygdala nila more than what their prefrontal cortex is telling. Ano ba kasi yung prefrontal cortex? Prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain where you use your logic, you use reasoning, you use long-term thinking, you think of future consequences. Prefrontal cortex yon. But again, during this time, hindi pa ganun ka-develop yung prefrontal cortex ng mga teenagers. Mas malakas ang hatak ng amygdala. So in general, ang sinasabi ko lang dito, most teenagers are more emotional than rational. Mas nangunguna o nangunguna sila when it comes to listening to their emotions more than listening to their reason. At alam nyo, merong itong implication to love and decision making. Kaya ang mga teenagers kapag na-in love, sobra-sobra. Ang epekto rin sa kanila kapag nabasted sila or kapag hindi nag-work yung relationship nila, sobra-sobra din. Basically, all emotions of a teenager is highly intensified because of the emotional nature of their brain. Kaya nga importante na ang isang teenager, lalong-lalo na when it comes to dealing with emotions, meron silang adult na pwedeng takbuhan o tanungan on how to handle these strong emotions. Because remember, teenagers encounter these strong emotions for the first time. First time nilang madidepress, first time nilang masosobrang excite, no? So minsan, sa sobrang lakas ng emotion that they feel, they don't know how to handle it. They don't know what to do. And this is where adults need to enter the picture and teach them kung paano ba i-handle yung mga emotions na yan. We'll talk more about that later. But I would like you to focus more here on decision making. Meron din itong implication sa decision making ng mga teenagers because most of the time, they are hijacked by their amygdala. Ibig sabihin yan, karamihan ng mga teenagers, when they make decisions, they base it on feelings. They base it on what they feel more than what is the right thing to do. So, ang mga teenagers, kapag gumagawa ng decision yan, nakabase talaga yan sa nararamdaman nila. Kaya karamihan ng mga teenagers mapusok, marupok, Diyan nanggagaling yan. Bakit sila mapusok? Bakit sila marupok? Because they easily give in to the calls of their emotions. And this is not good for many situations. Lalong-lalo na kapag yung decision na gagawin nila, merong epekto sa kanilang long term. Diba? Like for example, pagbubuntis. Masyadong na in love, binigay lahat, nabuntis. Ganoon din naman yung lalaki, diba? O mahal na mahal, nakabuntis. O, ang problema, hindi pa sila ready para maging parents. Wala pa silang gaano karaming knowledge, wala pa silang resources to support pregnancy or to even enter parenthood. But this is one of the consequences nga of having an emotional brain. Leading cause of death of teenagers. Alam nyo kung ano? Road injury. Specifically, bakit ba in the first place nagkakaroon ng road injury? Number one, marami mga teenagers, they practice drunk driving. Hindi lahat. Pero malakas ang hatak ng drunk driving. Remember what I told you, karamihan ng mga teenagers mahilig sa thrill because of dopamine levels. One of the ways that they seek thrill is they drink and then they drive without their parents knowing. Kasi exciting yun di ba? Yung kasama mo, barkada mo, inuman kayo, tapos meron kayong kotse, pwede kayong pumunta kahit saan, hindi alam ng parents nyo, i-combine mo lahat ng situations na yon, mataas ang thrill. So most teenagers do that. Unfortunately, when they give in to that call of their emotions, it leads to bad things. Namamatay tuloy sila. Nagkakaroon sila ng road injury. Another reason sa road injury is yung manner ng pagdadrive. Ang mga teenagers, iba talaga mag-drive compared to adults Kasi nga, yung brain ng teenager, very active, gusto ng thrill, most of the time, bibilisan nila mag-drive. Because speed gives thrill. Kapag mabilis ang pagpapatakbo ng sasakyan, di ba? Nagbibigay thrill yan Nakakasatisfy yan ng thrill. Lalong-lalo na sa isang teenager. Unfortunately, when they become too fast, when they drive too fast, minsan minamalas, na-aksidente. Okay? So, yan po yung mga implication if the teenager has a very emotional brain. Okay? And number 3, during this time, they are addicted to rewards. Again, this is another attribute of the brain during adolescence. Lagi siya naghahanap ng mga rewards. Lagi siya naghahanap ng mga masasarap na bagay. And some of these things the teenagers look for or even strive for during this time, drugs, alcohol, sex, money, food. Yan. Yung mga bagay na yan yung hinahanap ng teenage brain during this time. So, to make the long story short, in summary lang, ang pwede nating matutunan dito, emotional ang utak ng isang teenager. Diba? Most of the time, their actions are based on the things that they feel. Kaya naman, ang sinasabi ko dito, this can be dangerous. When we base our actions, when we base our decisions on what our emotions are telling us, minsan hindi nagiging maganda yung resulta. Bakit? The Bible tells us that the heart is deceitful above all things. Ibig sabihin, yung mga sinasabi sa atin ng emotions natin, most of the time, hindi tama. Because it's very deceitful. At marami na tayong alam na kwento dyan, na nagbase sa emotion, yung decision, hindi naging maganda yung outcome. Kaya nga, even cognitive psychologists will tell us, if we want to make wiser decisions in life or even in organizations, ang dapat mong gawin, ibase mo yan sa iyong logic. Huwag ka nagpapadala masyado sa emotions mo. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that emotions are bad. I am not saying na it's bad to feel things. But if you always base your decisions on what you feel, not based on how you think, bad things may happen. Unfortunately, ito yung mataas na tendency ng mga teenagers, making decisions based on their feelings. Kaya nga isa pang implication dito, kinakailangan talaga ng gabay ng adult brain. So, I hope you can see the picture, So, ang teenage brain, highly emotional, very wild. Most of the time, gagawa yan ng mga bagay na hindi rational. Ano ang gamot doon? Hindi mo naman pwedeng pababain yung dopamine level ng teenage brain kasi nature yun Ang implication doon, ang right reaction dyan, ang right response dyan is to surround the teenage brain with an adult brain. Kasi yung adult brain, very rational naman yan. Siya naman yung magpupuno ng kakulangan ng teenage brain. na pagiging rational, di ba? So, hindi man rational yung teenage brain, meron namang umaalalay sa kanya na adult brain who is more rational. Kaya ang nangyayari, natututo yung teenager how to balance the emotional and the rational. Natututo yung teenager na hindi sa lahat ng pagkakataon, paiirali niya yung emotions niya. Na mas maganda na ginagamit niya yung kanyang decision, yung kanyang reason, more than the emotion. Ang tawag natin dito parental monitoring, the degree to which parents are knowledgeable or involved in a teenager's life. Ibig sabihin ng parental monitoring, lagi mo siyang inaalalayan, lagi kang available, lagi mong tinitignan yung mga ginagawa ng teenager. Para alalayan siya, no? Again, para alalayan, hindi para kontrolin. Iba po yun, no? Oo, in parental monitoring, you are there to simply facilitate, to simply guide the teenager's behavior, to guide the teenager's thinking, to guide the teenager's feeling. The more parental monitoring you give to your teenager, the more positive the development of the teenager. In fact, studies have shown, yung mga parents na mabababa ang parental monitoring, ibig sabihin hindi nila masyadong pinapansin yung mga teenagers nila, hindi nila masyadong kinakausap, wala silang masyadong pakialam kung nasaan yung teenagers nila. Well, low parental monitoring is a risk factor towards a number of negative adolescent outcomes. Hindi maganda ang mga nangyayari sa isang teenager na mayroong mga parents na hindi sila minomonitor, nabubuntis ng maaga, naaadik, naglalayas, bumabagsak sa eskwela, napapabarkada sa mga masasama kasi nga mababa ang parental monitoring. In fact, even in the Bible, ini-encourage ang parental monitoring. Diba? Sabi sa Deuteronomy, paano mo dapat ituturo yung batas ng Diyos sa anak mo? You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in the house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. So constantly dapat kadikit mo yung teenager para alalayan siya. Take note, dikit ka ng dikit sa teenager para alalayan, hindi para kontrolin. No, iba naman yun. No? That's an entirely different topic. But again, parental monitoring, you are always available, you are always there to guide the teenager. That's very good for the development of the teenager. Kaya alam nyo, isa ring risk factor ngayon yung living setup ng mga teenagers, especially before the pandemic, di ba? Kasi before the pandemic, marami talaga ang common setup yung mga estudyante na malapit sa eskwelahan nakatira sa mga condo units. And it's very understandable kasi yung mga pamilya ng mga estudyante nasa malalayong lugar, yung iba nasa probinsya. So hindi nga naman practical na araw-araw babiyahe sila from Manila papunta sa kanilang mga probinsya, 'di ba? So ang ginagawa, nagre-rent na lang ng condo para mas malapit doon sa eskwelahan. Well, knowing all these things about the teenage brain, masasabi ko that when teenagers live alone inside condo units with other teenagers, that's a risky factor to be in. A risky situation to be in. 'Di ba? Do you agree? Kasi yung mga teenagers nga, yung mga brains nila, mga wild. Tapos nagsama-sama pa sila sa isang kwarto. No? Tapos sa katabi nila, sa baba lang ng condo, merong mga gimikan, no? Nagsasatisfy ng mga worldly desires. Nandiyan ang alcohol, nandiyan ang drugs, nandiyan ang availability ng sex, 'di ba? So nagsama-sama tuloy yung mga teenager brain, nandoon sila sa environment na nagsasatisfy ng pleasure, bad things may happen. And I know yung mga nakikinig sa akin ngayon, no, marami na kayong mga balitang naririnig kung ano ang nangyayari kapag ang mga teenagers nagsama-sama sa inuman, no? Meron kasama mga opposite sex at meron silang mga sariling condo units. I hope you can see the picture, di ba? Oh, risk factor yan. Especially drugs and alcohol. Di ba sabi ko kanina, malakas ang hatak ng mga bagay that gives pleasure to the teenager. And one of those things, drugs and alcohol. Talagang malakas ang hatak niyan sa isang teenage brain because it gives a lot of gratification, a lot of pleasure. And studies show, ano ba yung iba't ibang mga reasons why a teenager would look for these things other than brain behavior and low parental monitoring? Number 3, peer influence. Malakas ang hatak ng peers during this time. 'Di ba? Maraming mga teenagers, they are willing to disobey their parents just to obey the peers. Mas malakas ang bearing, mas malakas ang validity ng sinasabi ng peers more than the parents. Minsan, mas pinaniniwalaan pa ng teenager yung sinasabi ng kaibigan more than sa sinasabi ng magulang. Another reason, bumabagsak sila sa eskwelahan. They don't feel good. No, they don't feel good. They feel bad when they fail academically. And so, to cancel out the negative feeling, para ma-feel good sila sa sarili nila, magdadrugs na lang, magiinuman na lang. Number 5, typographical lang yan, no? But number 5 is very important. One of the most powerful forces, bakit ba ang mga teenagers go after drugs and alcohol? It's their exposure to the media. Kasi we have to be aware na meron tayong mga media contents. Meron tayong mga influencers out there. Hindi na lang ako magsasabi ng pangalan, no? Na nagpo-promote ng alcohol abuse, ng smoking abuse. Yung drugs, hindi masyadong kasi illegal yan. Pero smoking and alcohol, naku po, nagkalat yan sa media advertising. And the way media portrays smoking and alcohol, talaga namang napaka-positive, di ba? I mean, every time there's a commercial on cigarette, there's a commercial on alcohol, napaka-positive, napaka-pleasant, no? Masasaya yung mga tao, nagiinuman yung mga magbabarkada, good things are happening in life, kaya na-associate yan ng mga teenagers na ang paninigarilyo, ang pag-alcohol, maganda, masaya. Babawi na lang yung mga advertisers na yan doon sa dulo ng commercial, sasabihin, drink moderately. But you cannot expect a teenage brain to drink moderately. Kasi nga, given what I've told you about the teenage brain, it's very emotional. Hindi nila maiisip yung drink moderately whenever they are already with their friends and having a great time with the absence of their parents. Kaya nga, di ba, in the community level, yung ibang mga mayor, especially si Yorme Isko, Yorme Isko, kung nakikinig ka, I salute you dito sa ginawa mo, no? Talagang this is a good move by the government to take care of its adolescents, 'di ba? Pinasara niya yung mga establishments na nagbebenta ng alcohol near schools. Kasi illegal 'yan. That particular law, bawal magbenta ng alcohol malapit sa school, bawal magtinda ng mga beer, bawal magtinda ng mga alcoholic beverages near schools. It's based on this idea on the teenage brain. Kasi ang mga teenagers madaling ma-distract at kapag na-ingest nila yung mga alcohol na yan, yung mga alak na yan, hindi nagiging maganda yung epekto sa kanilang teenage life. Kaya again, Yorme Isko, if you're listening, I highly salute you to what you did. This only shows that the city of Manila is really concerned about the welfare of its teenagers. And one more thing, no? Isa pang dapat pinapag-usapan sa teenage life is the music the teenagers listen to. Alam nyo kasi sa psychology, you have to remember na ang music, merong epekto yan sa ating pag-iisip. Ang music, hindi lang siya basta-basta tumutunog na e-enjoy ng tao. Basically, the human mind, the human spirit absorbs the contents, the lyrics, the messages of this music, and it affects our behaviors, our feelings, our thinking in so many ways. Kaya nga ang tanong, ano ba ang pinakikinggan ng mga teenagers? 'Di ba? Well, here in the Philippines, syempre kung teenager ka, malamang sa malamang ang genre na ang gusto ng mga yan is R&B or rap or rock or pop. 'Di ba? Yan yung mga gusto ng mga teenagers, no? Because studies show also in the psychology of music na yung malalakas pala na sounds, yung mga beats na maririnig mo sa R&B, na maririnig mo sa rap, sa rock, malakas din pala ang hatak noon sa teenage brain. It feels good for them every time they hear the beat, every time they hear those guitars sounding wildly. They like those patterns. Kaya nga, ang tanong natin, anong klaseng mga kanta ba yung pinakikinggan ng mga teenagers? I did a little research on this, no? Nag-search ako sa Google top 10 R&B songs that teenagers listen to. Tapos binasa ko yung mga lyrics ng mga top songs that teenagers listen to. Ay naku po. Magugulat kayo sa mga lyrics na nakasulat doon sa mga kanta. Again, hindi naman lahat masama, pero yung mga top songs at least na nakita ko, ay nako, hindi healthy ang mga messages. No, halimbawa, merong isang kanta, ang title, Go Crazy. Ito yung sinasabi ng kanta, oh yeah. Laid up, got me thinking, babe. Tell me if you with it, cause I'm with it, babe. Hindi na lang ako magsasabi, pero ano yung it na yan? Alam nyo na yan. Just read between the lines. I haven't heard from you in a minute, babe. Just tell me what to do when I hit it, babe. Ano yung ihihit? Ano yung meron siya, yun yung it kanina, at ihihit niya yun. Read between the lines. I know, you know that. Trips to your crib in the middle of the night. Ayan. Nag-violate pa ng ng curfew. Oh, trips to your crib in the middle of the night. Ibig sabihin, tumatakas lang. Pupunta siya sa bahay nung partner niya in the middle of the night. I know that you miss me because I put down right. Babe, I can put you on a fight. You know what that a nigga like me can change your life. Gumamit pa ng derogatory term. Alam nyo ba yung word na N-word na yan, hindi maganda yan. That is a politically incorrect term. Hindi yan dapat ginagamit to call someone, to label another race. Pero the song use these kinds of words. Imaginein mo, araw-araw pakinggan niya ng teenager, magiging way of life niya yan. Magiging part na yan ng belief system niya. And when these messages, when these words become part of the teenager's belief system, naku po, you can expect a lot of problem behaviors in the future. Kaya nga, the Bible tells us, wina-warning nga na tayo ng Bible, hindi dapat ganyan yung pinapakinggan o yung iniisip o yung nilalagay natin sa isip natin. Ano dapat ang nilalagay sa isip natin? Sa ating mind. Whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy, yan yung mga nilalagay sa mind. Pero again, nung nag-research ako, tignan nyo yung mga words, yung mga lyrics ng mga kanta ng mga teenagers ngayon. It's not true. It's not noble. It's not right. It's not pure. Definitely not lovely. It's not admirable. It's not excellent. It's not praiseworthy. Again, hindi naman lahat ng kanta, pero majority that's the norm. Kaya kinakailangan maging maingat din yung mga teenagers sa pakikinig ng mga music. And the parents must also be concerned about this. Parte yan ng parental monitoring. Binabantayan nyo rin, I'm talking to the parents, kung ano yung mga pinapakinggan nila, kung ano yung mga pinapanood nila, lalong-lalo na ngayon. Napakabilis na lang ng internet, Wi-Fi. Kahit sino can have an access to the internet. So teenagers in the private parts of their room, nako, they can surf all the contents that they want. Question, are the parents checking it? As a developmental psychologist, ako, pinopromote ko talaga that parents should know. Parents should be concerned about the websites that teenagers are surfing. During adolescence, malaking issue din sa isang teenager yung kanilang katawan at yung tinatawag nating body image, the extent to which adolescents like changes in their bodies. Ibig sabihin, gaano nila kagusto yung katawan nila. Nagiging issue na yan. Nagiging sobrang concerned na sila kung maganda ba o kung maganda ba yung katawan nila. And the general pattern is, according to Berman 2006, body image is more negative for girls than boys. And this is a very interesting explanation. Bakit mas negative yung body image ng babae kumpara sa lalaki? Kasi raw, yung mga changes na nangyayari during adolescence, mas desirable for males than females. Kasi yung mga males, kapag nagpo-pubertal changes sila, their body becomes more muscular. They become more fit. Bumibilis yung metabolism ng mga lalaki during this time. Kaya marami sa mga teenage guys, no, mga batak ang katawan, nagkakaroon sila ng muscles. Add to that the effect of testosterone. The thing is, in our culture, we glorify muscular guys. 'Di ba? Isang ano yan eh. Isang cultural value yan. No, na kapag ikaw fit ka, muscular ka, okay ka. Yan yung advantage ng guys. Yan yung advantage ng having a male body. Yung pagbabago ng katawan mo ay tugma doon sa cultural ideal of being muscular. Problema yan sa mga babae kasi ang mga babae, ang cultural ideal nila ay maging slim. But puberty does not make them slim. Alam nyo ba yon? In fact, one of the effects of estrogen, one of the effects of experiencing puberty, specifically females, they gain fats. So, hindi tugma doon sa kanilang cultural ideal of being slim compared to boys. Boys, cultural ideal, muscular, guess what? Puberty makes them muscular. Ang girls hindi ganun eh. Cultural ideal to be slim, their bodies are not becoming slim. It's creating a lot of fats. Kaya naman, ang implication nito, mas pressured ang mga teenage girl na magpaganda compared to sa mga lalaki. Kaya nga yung issue ng body shaming, issue ng mga girls yan eh. Although pwede rin naman mangyari ang body shaming sa mga guys, pero hindi siya very frequent eh. Usually when you say body shaming, somebody body shamed someone. Somebody felt bad because she was body shamed. Most of the time, girls yan. Kasi nga, in our culture, girls are expected to be beautiful. Bad news, it's harder for a girl to be beautiful, especially during adolescence. Kaya yung pressure sa mga girls to make their body image good, it's more of a struggle. Kaya this also explains why eating disorders are more common to girls than guys. Lalong-lalo na sa adolescence. Maraming mga teenage girls ngayon, merong mga eating disorders, and the origin of that, it's from that situation that they are in. Culture expects them to have this kind of body, but puberty is not giving them that kind of body. So they struggle. Nagkakaroon sila ng conflict. Nateten sila bakit hindi nila ma-achieve yung ideal body that culture has set. Kaya kinakailangan din dito yung mga magulang, pinagsasabihan din yung mga teenagers na hindi masyadong dapat pinaprioritize sa buhay yung minimit lagi ang cultural ideals. Diba? Things that are inside are more important than things that are outside. Diba? Tinuturo din yan sa Bible, and I teach that also in my subject, Understanding the Self. People need to learn that we need to value more the things that we have inside our character, our personality, our temperament, our relationships. Yun dapat talaga yung mas pinapaganda muna. Mas mahalagang pagandahin yon. Mas mahalagang strengthen yung mga pangloob kumpara sa mga bagay na panglabas. And a parent or both parents should be able to explain that to their teenagers. During this time, let's talk about their cognitive development. Again, we remember John Piaget. Sabi ni John Piaget, ang mga teenagers, they now enter formal operational thinking. Ang key attribute ng isang tao na formal operational thinker, they can now process abstract things. They become more reflective. Lumalalim na sila mag-isip. And true enough, di ba? Kung mausap ka ng isang bata, early childhood, versus kung mausap ka ng isang teenager, one of the difference that they will have, mas malalim kausap ang isang teenager. They can now think or process what is not physically perceivable. Like what? They think about abstract ideas, fairness, love, God, heaven, hell. They think about abstract things about themselves. They think about themselves. They think about the things that they are thinking. And most importantly, teenagers think about their identity. Diba? Isa raw sa pinakamahalagang tanong na dapat masagot ng isang teenager is the question, who am I? Sino ba ako? Sinabi yan ni Erik Erikson. That during adolescence, this is where teenagers are in. They are in the process of finding their identity. And they have to be successful doing this. Kinakailangan masagot nila yung mga tanong about themselves. Kasi kung hindi, ano mangyayari? Sabi ni Erik Erikson, they will end up being confused for the rest of their lives about who they are. So, kinakailangan ma-resolve ng teenager yung sarili nila during this period. Mahanap nila kung sino sila. And what are some of these things? Ano ba yung mga smaller components ng identity? Di ba sinabi nga ni Britney Spears yan sa kanta niya, I'm not a girl. Don't tell me what to believe. I'm just trying to find the woman in me. All I need is time, a moment that is mine. Most teenagers, they use their time finding their identity. Such as what? Ito yung mga components ng identity that teenagers try to find. Ano ba yung sexuality ko? Ano ba yung talents and skills ko? Sino ba yung mga peers na dapat kong samahan? Ano ba yung mga goals ko, both short-term and long-term? What is my relationship with God? Is spirituality important for me? Ano ba dapat yung mga clothes na sinusuot ko? Ano ba yung bagay sa akin? Ano ba yung social image ko? Paano ko ba dapat ipapackage yung sarili ko sa ibang tao? Ano ba ako? Geek ba ako? Party boy ba ako? Party girl ba ako? Church boy or church girl ba ako? Ano ba yung packaging na bagay sa akin? Ano ba yung packaging na komportable ako? The following are the things that teenagers try to answer about themselves. Kaya nga tama si Britney Spears kanina, you will need time for this. All I need is time, a moment that is mine. And during those free times that teenagers have, ito yung mga bagay na talagang sinasagot nila about themselves. And during this time, teenagers also love to have a sense of independence. Sabi dun sa kanta, I'm not a girl, there is no need to protect me. It's time that I learn to face up to this on my own. Kaya marami mga teenagers, they want to do things on their own. Diba, nakaka-thrill sa kanila if they are doing things that adults do by themselves. Like for example, driving. Diba? Going back to the number one cause of death ng mga teenagers. Kaya nga marami mga teenagers, yan ang number one cause of death eh. Tinatakas nila yung kotse without their parents knowing. Kasi nga, it gives them thrill. It gives them a sense of independence. That's why it's also important for a teenager to have their own room. Ideally, dapat ganun. No? Oo, kasi nga, yung sense of independence nila na yan, gusto nila may sarili silang mundo. You know? And one of the ways they express this is by looking for their own room. Gusto nila may sarili silang kwarto. Kaya, dream din yan ng isang teenager, no? Yung makapagsolo sila sa isang kwarto. Oo, unfortunately, hindi lahat ng teenagers merong ganong capability kasi yung bahay nila, limited lang talaga yung rooms. Pero, yung ibang mga teenagers talaga, they have that privilege, having their own room. And one of the most sacred times that they have as teenagers is their time alone inside that room. Because inside that room, they feel a sense of independence. They can do things without the knowledge of their parents. Diba? Sabi nga ng isang author na nabasa ko, when your children are teenagers, it's important to have a dog. Bakit? So that someone in the house is happy to see you. Kasi karamihan ng mga teenagers, ayaw nilang nakakita ng parents. Kasi yung mga parents, pag nandyan, maraming pinapakialaman, maraming dinidikta. Teenagers want to do things on their own. Question, is that bad? It's not necessarily bad. But it could turn bad. Depende rin kasi yan. Ano ba kasi yung bagay that teenagers want to do on their own? Kung dangerous yan, baka masama yan. Pero yung mga bagay na they just want to explore, they just want to read a book on their own, they just want time alone to listen to their music, okay lang naman yan. Just as long as the parent can weigh, natitimbang niya kung ano yung mga bagay na pwedeng gawin ng teenager mag-isa versus hindi niya pwedeng gawin mag-isa. Another way that teenagers express their independence other than having their own room is they express independence to their body. They want to establish ownership to their body. My body, my choice. Kaya marami mga teenagers may mga ginagawa sila sa katawan nila na nagpapakita, na nag-establish na I own my body. I can do what I want with my body. Diba? Nagpapahikaw sa dila, nagpapatato, you know, they have sex. Kasi nga, itong mga behaviors na ito, ay parang ano yan, no? When they do these things, their desire for independence is satisfied. Feeling nila independent na independent sila when they do these things. Another way they express their independence, some teenagers rebel. Again, hindi naman lahat, but this can happen. Diba? Kasi remember, yung mga parents are there to set limits. They are there to set prohibitions, which is in contrary to what teenagers want. Remember, ang teenagers gusto nila independence. Pero yung mga parents nandyan to set limits. Even in history di ba? Bakit ba ang mga tao nagre-rebelde sa isang gobyerno? Because they want independence from that government. Kaya nagre-rebelde. 'Di ba? Hindi na sumusunod sa government para makawala sila doon sa power ng government. Guess what? In the system of the family, the same thing happens. Kumbaga parang yung parents yun yung gobyerno, yung teenager yun yung mamamayan na gustong lumaya, gusto ng kalayaan. So nagkakaroon sila ng power struggle, teenagers rebel. Ayaw nilang sundin yung mga sinasabi, yung mga prohibitions ng mga magulang. Sabi ng magulang, umuwi ka ng 8 p.m., umuwi yung teenager ng 3 a.m. Because this is their way of establishing their independence. Kaya nga, in fairness to the parents, no, it's very challenging for a parent na magpalaki ng isang teenager. There is always a struggle in the balance of power. Diba? Challenging na malaman mo kung gaano karaming independence ba yung ibibigay mo sa teenager mo. Gaano karaming restriction ba yung dapat mong ibigay sa kanya. Ano yan mahirap balansehin yan. Restriction and independence. You are the authority as the parent. You have the power over the teenager. But your teenager wants a little bit of that power given to him or her. How would you balance it? So in fairness to parents, no, talagang they are also in a difficult situation. Pero according to developmental psychologists, how do you deal with this kind of setup? How do you deal with a teenager constantly challenging the authority of the parents? Ang susi, patience and consistent care. Hindi dapat galit. Kasi some parents, talagang gumagamit ng galit, gumagamit ng force, gumagamit ng lakas para ma-tame down yung teenage energy, no? Hindi ganyan. Dapat, you use a lot of patience and consistent care. Let me read to you an excerpt coming from a journal article that talks about this. Sabi dito, even as adolescents turn to peers as role models, companionship, and intimacy, they look to parents for a secure base from which they can try their wings. So, kahit nagtatry yung teenager na kumawala, na maging independent, yung parents nandun pa rin para alalayan siya. The most secure adolescents have strong supportive relationships with parents who are, yung parents to, no, attuned to the way the young people see themselves, permit and encourage their strivings for independence, and provide a safe haven in times of emotional stress. Lagi lang sila nandoon habang yung teenager nag-e-explore. So, the teenagers are given a room to explore, to express their independence. But while teenagers are doing that, parents are there. Parents are there to support, to give care. They are the secure base. So kapag may nangyaring masama sa teenager or if the teenager feels bad or kung may mga tanong yung teenager in the process of exploration, the parents are there. Yung ibang parents kasi ang ginagawa, sige, mag-explore ka. Kalimutan mo ng magulang mo ako. Hindi po tama yun. Oo, nagbibigay po yan ng anxiety sa teenager na wala na siyang babalikan. Diba? So kinakailangan talaga consistent care and support sa isang teenager na nag-explore. The Bible tells us, he who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is careful to discipline him. Ibig sabihin, okay lang din dumisiplina ng teenager. In the process of exploration, kapag meron siyang hindi magandang ginawa, dapat din naman dumisiplina. Disiplinahin ng magulang yung teenager. But, again, a lot of people miss this in Proverbs. They only see the rod Diba? Yung rod. Hindi lang puro rod yung ginagamit. Hindi mo lang laging papaluin. Hindi ka lang laging magbibigay ng negative something para magdisiplina. Anong sabi? Careful. Careful to discipline them. And when you say careful, you are careful not to damage any spiritual aspect of the teenager. Hindi mo sisirain yung self-esteem niya. Hindi mo sisirain yung self-confidence niya. Hindi mo sisirain yung identity niya sa pagdidisiplina mo. Yan. Discipline with love. Yan yung mga susi kung paano magpalaki ng isang teenager. During this time, teenagers are also very curious. In fact, may pagkakaiba ang curiosity ng mga teenagers compared to sa mga bata. What's the difference between childhood curiosity and adolescent curiosity? Childhood curiosity, it's very easy to pacify. It's very easy to satisfy. Ang mga bata kapag na-curious yan, ang gagawin nila magtatanong. Tatanong yan sa magulang. And when parents give them the answer, because they are adults, remember, kids idolize adults, no? Idealize adults, maniniwala sila, and that's it, because they have answered their question. But a teenager is different. First, they will not ask parents. They have a question, pero malamang sa malamang hindi nila itatanong sa magulang yan. Second, kung hindi sila magtatanong sa magulang, paano nila masasagot? Experiment. Sila mismo ang maghahanap ng sagot. Yan yung difference. Ang mga bata, rarely nag-explore yan ng sarili nilang sagot sa tanong nila. Tatanong lang yan sa magulang. Pero ang mga teenagers, may tanong sila, hindi nila tatanong sa magulang yung sagot, sila ang maghahanap ng kasagutan. Pero again, this could be risky in some situations. Especially when the questions that they are asking and the answers that they want to find, in the process, pwedeng merong masamang mangyari. Like what? Ano ba itong mga bagay na marami silang tanong? Alcohol o alak. Ano ba ang feeling ng malasing? Ano bang makikita mo kapag nalalasing ka? Paano ba mag-smoke? Paano ba humit-hit ng sigarilyo? Paano yung usok na pupunta sa baga? Paano yung tamang paghawak ng sigarilyo? Paano ba sumipsip ng usok? Ano ba yung epekto ng drug na ito? Totoo ba na itong drugs na ito, pag kinuha mo, matatawa ka na matatawa? Totoo ba na parang nasa heaven ka kapag uminom ka ng drug na ito? And of course, sex, di ba? Remember, sex drive, di ba? So maraming mga curiosity ang mga teenagers about sexual things. Ano ang feeling na kapag nagkikiss kayo? Kapag nag-hug kayo sa isang kwarto? Ano bang feeling nun? So on and so forth. Again, in the process of teenagers, exploring these things could be risk factor. Maraming pwedeng masamang mangyari sa kanila dito in the process of exploring these things. Halimbawa, early pregnancy, or addiction, or accidents, di ba? Yan yung mga bagay na masamang mangyayari, pwedeng masamang mangyari when teenagers are exploring these things. Kaya, again, papasok na naman dito yung parental monitoring. Dapat ang mga parents na riyan para pagsabihan ang mga teenagers na hindi nila kinakailangan ma-experience yung mga yan for them to get answers. They can research about this. In fact, yan yung maganda sa society natin ngayon, no? Nandyan ang Google. I-Google mo lang, what does it feel like to be drunk? Okay na yun. Hindi mo kinakailangan ma-experience na ikaw mismo yung maging drunk para malaman mo what it feels to be drunk. Kasi sisirain mo lang ang sarili mo kung maglalasing ka. Diba? Yung favorite analogy ko nga dyan hindi mo kinakailangang malason para malaman mo na ang isang lason ay lason nga. Makakita ka lang ng isang tao na nalason before, okay na yon para malaman mo na ang isang bagay nakakalason. Okay? So, I hope that analogy made sense, no? So, ito yung mga examples of some of the things that may possibly go wrong kapag yung exploration nila ay hindi maganda yung naging resulta. They become parents unexpectedly. Alam nyo ba, ang Pilipinas, isa yan sa mga key statistic natin, no? Halos laging mataas ang ating rate of teenage pregnancy. A lot of our teenagers, female teenagers, they are already parents. Starting at the age of 15. May ibang cases nga, 14 pa lang, may anak na. Diba? And, nagpapatong-patong kasi yung mga negative effects niyan Because they are not yet ready to be parents, yung anak na inaalagaan nila will also suffer the consequences. They are not yet ready to be parents, therefore they don't know how to be good parents. And when they don't know how to be good parents, when they don't have the skill to be good parents, the baby suffers. So yung baby, kapag lumaki siya, nagiging problem yung baby sa society because they were not parented well. Bakit ba hindi sila na-parent ng maayos? Hindi pa kasi ready mag-parent yung nagpe-parent sa kanila. So, patong-patong yan, no? Oo. So, ito yung mga numbers natin when it comes to teenage pregnancy. Pataas ang pataas. Well, although this is an old data, no? I don't have the data for 2020, but the trend is that teenagers, marami mga teenagers ngayon, kababata pa, nagiging magulang na. Another issue during adolescence is peer influence. Diba sinabi ko na kanina to, this is the time of a person's life where mas pinaniniwalaan natin yung sinasabi ng kaibigan more than sa sinasabi ng magulang. And if you study the literature on teenagers, a lot of their behaviors, a lot of their beliefs, a lot of the emotions that they feel, laging merong kinalaman yung presence ng kanilang mga kaibigan. 'Di ba? Sabi nga ng isang study, several studies have revealed that teens who smoke often try to coax their friends into taking up this habit. And this is not only limited to smoking. The same with alcohol. The same thing with drugs. The same thing with sex. So, you can only imagine, wild na nga yung teenage brain, meron pang nagsusulsol na mga peers na gawin nila yung mga bagay na yan. Very dangerous times during the teenage years. Kaya again, paulit-ulit kong sinasabi to at hindi ako magsasawang sabihin to, the importance of parental monitoring. Hindi dapat hinahayaan lagi mag-isa yung teenage brain. Lalong-lalo na kapag kasama yung peers. Lalong-lalo na kapag may sariling mga places tong mga teenagers na to. Because if they are not guided well, bad things may happen. Alright? So in closing, ano ba yung mga tips para ang isang teenager ay maging maayos ang paglaki? Again, we just go back to this quotation from the article na binasa ko sa inyo kanina. What's that? Ano yung ibibigay mo sa isang teenager? Companionship. Nandiyan ang intimacy. Nandiyan ang suporta. Companionship, intimacy, support. Yan yung tatlong bagay. Company, intimacy, and support. The more you give this to your teenager, the better your development will be. Teenage exploration must be paired with parental monitoring. They can coexist. Diba? Yung exploration naman, yung teenage exploration, hindi naman ibig sabihin yan, hayaan mo sila eh. Diba? Pwedeng nandyan ka to guide them while they are exploring. Sabi ni Lewis Kaplan, adolescence represents an inner emotional upheaval, a struggle between the eternal human wish to cling to the past and the equally powerful wish to get on with the future. So, anong ibig sabihin yan? Ang comment ko lang dito, napaka-negative naman yung picture ni Kaplan sa adolescence. Right? Pero, ang points ko dito, number one, hindi naman lahat negative. Remember, marami magagandang bagay ang nangyayari sa isang tao during adolescence. Formation of significant relationships. Minsan, dyan mo nahahanap yung true love mo, di ba? You explore new skills that you never knew you had. Dito mo nalalaman yung tunay na kakayanan mo bilang tao. Nagagamit nga yan later on sa pagpili ng kurso diba? Sa college. Diyan mo rin nakikita yan. Teenage years is also very exciting, diba? Maraming mga bagay na nakaka-excite gawin kapag teenager ka. So, hindi naman lahat negative. Number two, again, importante ang gaway ng adults. Whether or not the teenage years will be a positive experience or not really depends kung nagabayan ba sila ng maayos ng mga magulang nila while they are exploring their teenage life. I have some few Bible verses for parents. Parents, tandaan nyo to. Sabi, discipline your children and they will give you peace. They will bring you the delights you desire. Disiplinahin. Kung merong maling ginawa, disiplinahin. Kung meron tamang ginawa, purihin. Hindi lang dapat puro disiplina. Diba? But discipline is very important. Kaya mga teenagers na nakikinig, huwag rin kayo magagalit sa parents nyo kapag dinidisiplina kayo. Diba? Hindi ibig sabihin, pag dinidisiplina kayo, killjoy sila. Oh, hindi ibig sabihin no, na magre-rebelde kayo kapag dinidisiplina kanila. Because they only want the best for you. And to discipline their kids, that's very biblical. And when the Bible tells you something, when the Bible tells you something to do, it is always the right thing to do. Teenagers, tandaan nyo, Proverbs 1:8-9. Listen to your father's instruction and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They are garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. Kapag ina-absorb mo yung tinuturo ng mga magulang mo sa'yo, guess what? It's for you. It's for your own benefit. 'Di ba? Yung analogy niya dito, no? Nagkakaroon ka ng garland, nagkakaroon ka ng chain to adorn your neck. Nagiging maganda yung buhay mo. Because you're listening to their counsel. Because remember, yung mga parents mo, almost doble ng age mo yan. Meaning, they have more wisdom than you. So don't have that illusion that you know better than your parents. Marami mga teenagers ganyan eh. The reason why they disobey their parents because they believe that they know better. Hindi po. Parents know better. And parents must know better. Ano yung lumang kasabihan? Papunta ka pa lang, pabalik na sila. They've been there, they've done that. And that wisdom that they have, if you listen to them and if you apply them as a teenager, magiging maganda ang development ng iyong teenage life. If you honor your father and mother, things go well for you and you will have a long life on earth. Bakit humahaba ang buhay ng tao kapag nakikinig sa magulang? Kasi yung wisdom na na-absorb nila sa magulang nila makes their life long. Alam nila yung mga batang nakikinig sa mga magulang, alam nila yung mga bagay na dapat iwasan. Alam nila yung mga bagay na dapat puntahan. That makes their life good. So I hope marami kayong natutunan sa ating maikling pag-aaral on adolescence. So our next chapter will talk about what it's like to be an adult. Thank you for listening and God bless.